Hi everyone, my name's Christopher Owen and I'm the LGBTQ Coordinator at 42nd Street. 42nd Street is a mental health charity located right on Ancoats in Manchester, and I run the Q42 project, which is a LGBT mental health sort of support space and a digital online space. And today I'm here to talk to you about LGBT mental health, or as I would rather say, LGBT emotional health and well-being. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about today include the issues facing LGBTQ plus people, the different ways that society impacts our emotional health and well-being, and then what we can do about it and how we can affect long-term change. Some of these topics might be difficult or upsetting, so just a little bit of a trigger warning if this is an area that's particularly sensitive to you. Feel free to log on out and then come on back later, but I'm hoping that this will actually be a really helpful start for you. So we're going to start by talking about something called heteronormativity, which sounds like a really big jargon word, but is actually pretty straightforward. Let me give you a really clear example of heteronormativity. You have two kids, they're like 5, and they're playing in a sandbox at school, and they're just having a good time. And one of them, his name is Billy, and the other one, her name is Susie. And a teacher walks up to Billy and Susie, and they go, "Oh, Billy, is that your girlfriend?" Super normal thing to happen. Happens all the time. But now let's say later, Billy is playing with his friend Bobby. If somebody were to walk up to them and go, "Billy, is that your boyfriend?" Whoa, now that's a weird question to ask. And the reason that that's a weird question to ask is because we assume that everybody is heterosexual. And if we suggest otherwise, it's perverted or weird or creepy or uncomfortable. But the fact of the matter is that Billy's 5. He's not dating either of these children. And if he is, it's just make-believe. It's not real. So when we are thinking about identity and we're thinking about people in the world, we need to be conscious of these sort of subconscious biases that dictate the way that we see everybody. And those subconscious biases and the way that the world is just structured is called heteronormativity, or that being heterosexual is considered the norm. And being any other sexual orientation is considered abnormal or weird or perverted. And we have the same thing for trans people, and this is called Cisnormativity. And this is also really common when we say, "Are you a boy or a girl?" There's sort of assumption that you have to be one or the other. And the way that we structure all of society to only include one or the other. We have a boys' toilet and a girls' toilet. And we're very strict about who can go where. And so in a world of cisnormativity, that means that trans people often don't just have somewhere to go to the bathroom. It's a really ridiculous system that's really harmful for a lot of people. So we need to do something about heteronormativity and cisnormativity, because it has a genuine harm on LGBTQ plus people. It can sound just like, well, most people are straight, so like, get over it. But actually, the problem is that it affects the way we see ourselves. When the world tells you that you don't exist in spaces, where you don't see yourself existing in spaces, it affects your sense of self. It affects your identity. Let me give you a really clear example. There are so many Marvel superheroes. We watch the Avengers films, you've got Iron Man and Thor and Black Widow and Captain America and the Hulk and Hawkeye, and I could go on and on and on and on. And all of them are straight, and all of them are cisgender. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But where are the LGBTQ plus characters? Where are they? Why don't we have any gay action stars? Or transgender leads in a romance film? Where are we? We're very few and far between, and the kinds of stories that are told about us are also very limited. And so this means that we don't get a lot of external validation on what kinds of people we're allowed to be. And this affects the way we can perceive ourselves and perceive our relationships with others and our place within the world. Let's do a quick exercise as part of this workshop. I want you to think about external validation of LGBTQ identities. Who are some really positive LGBT characters that you've seen in film or television? Take a minute, think about it, and write down maybe your top 3 to 5. Then, I want you to look at that list. Are they all gay? Are some of them women? Are some of them trans? How diverse is your list right there? Really think about it. Once you've got a list that you're then really proud of, why not share it? Why not promote those LGBT representations? Tweet it out, Instagram it, share it with your friends. Uplift some external validation to those around you right now. So the first huge consequence of normativity on our sense of self is called the window of tolerance. Our window of tolerance is about how much crap we can deal with before we go into a fight or flight mode. Are we gonna deal with a situation, run away from a situation, just completely freeze up? Most people have a certain level of tolerance before they go into that mode. But when all of society is hurting your sense of self, you don't know when it's appropriate to fight or flight. And so this affects your emotional health and your well-being because you're in a constant state of not really sure where you're at and how you're doing and who you are. And so that window of tolerance gets smaller and smaller and smaller, which then leads to you developing anxiety or depression or any other mental well-being issues. The second key issue is the ability to self-regulate, to self-soothe, to sort of go zen and be like, it's fine, I'm okay, it's fine. The ability to do that, it seems really straightforward, but actually when your sense of self isn't so fine, and you're not really sure whether you're fine, then your ability to self-regulate your emotions and soothe yourself becomes diminished, which is really, really harmful for our well-being. The third area of concern is about our inability to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable often sounds like a weakness. It sounds like, oh, you're too emotional, or you need to toughen up. But no, actually, vulnerability is a deeply brave act. To sort of say, here I am, bearing it all for you, have at it. It's really, actually a very brave, difficult thing. And when your sense of self is under so much pressure or threat from the world, you're less inclined to be vulnerable. And when you're less inclined to be vulnerable, what takes its place is shame. And that is the core problem for LGBTQ plus people. Shame. So what is shame? I think the easiest way to understand shame is to understand how it is different from guilt. Guilt is when you do something wrong. Shame is when you are something wrong. So I can feel guilty about lying or cheating or stealing or hurting somebody. If I do those things, then I'm going to feel guilty. But that's not that I'm inherently a bad person. It's that I've done a bad thing and that I now need to apologize, fix it, make amends. There's something that I can do about it. Shame is that the sort of feeling that because I'm gay, I'm an inherently evil person, that I'm an abomination, that I'm evil, that I'm a pervert, that something is wrong with me. And those feelings of shame deeply affect us and really intensely hurt our emotional health and well-being to such an extent that it can take years to break through and that sort of pain and come to a place of a healthy sense of self. And when all of society, when all of heteronormativity and cisnormativity is telling you that you don't belong and that there's something wrong with you, it's really hard to not feel shame around being LGBTQ+. And so in order to take care of your emotional health and well-being, especially if you're an LGBTQ plus person, we need to interrogate our senses of shame. Often when we feel shame around what we are and who we are, we tend to close ourselves off from the rest of the world. And what that leads to is isolation. A lot of LGBTQ plus people, but especially LGBTQ plus young people, feel like they don't belong anywhere. They feel like nobody else knows what they're going through. They feel like they don't know anyone else who's going through similar things. And that's an extra step farther than loneliness. That's a deeply isolated separation from the world. And being so cut off from the rest of the world is very, very bad for us and our emotional health and well-being. And so we need to resist that. We need to fight those feelings, and we need to find ways to heal from that. And so one of the key ways that you can either support your own emotional health and well-being or support the emotional health and well-being of other people is through validation. It's through affirmation, through telling people that their feelings are valid, that their experiences are real, that their identities are genuine, and uplifting them and raising them up and saying, yes, be loud and proud and queer and know that you are loved and you are valued and you are respected. Validating somebody when they come out, when they share their identity with you, when they're just living their truth, when they're expressing themselves, can make all of the difference. But really key is that validation through words is beautiful, but validation through actions is significantly more powerful and far more impactful. Let's try another exercise. Let's think about validation. How can we validate ourselves? I want you to think about that guilt versus shame. There are loads of things that we can feel guilty for, but is there anything that you feel shame about? Maybe it's your sexuality, maybe it's your gender identity, maybe you've got a disability, or maybe you just feel like there might be something wrong with you. I want you to take a minute, really think about it, write it down, and then tell yourself, I am lovable. I am a good person. I am deserving of value and respect. I am enough, exactly as I am right now. I want you to take a moment, breathe it in, and think about, what do you need to hear? What do you need to hear? Write that down, and then read that out to yourself as a sort of mantra. And give yourself that affirming mantra every day until you start to believe it too. So let's think about resistance. Resistance to systems of heteronormativity and cisnormativity. Because these systems create the shame that then causes poor emotional health and well-being that we need validation to fix. But if we validate people from the get-go in our actions, we get rid of the problem entirely. And that validation is going to take more than words. That validation is going to take action. And those actions can take 4 key areas. There are 4 key ways of resisting systems of heteronormativity and cisnormativity. And these ways are developed by Patricia Hill Collins, a Black feminist scholar from the United States. Let's work through them one by one. The first form of resistance is through our interpersonal relationships. That just means our everyday interactions with other people. So think about it like this. How often have you heard the phrase, "That's so gay"? we hear it all the time. Oh, that bag is gay. Don't be gay. It's actually surprisingly harmful. Even if you're LGBTQ plus and you're not bothered by it, because you've heard it so often that it doesn't really hurt you anymore. What does this phrase actually mean? What is it implying? It's suggesting that being gay is gross or weird or stupid. Why not just use the words gross, weird, or stupid? It's about the everyday interactions that we have with people. And so if in our everyday interactions with people, we're being told that being gay is a bad thing, then we need to change that. And we need to start making being gay or bi or lesbian or trans or any other of the LGBTQ plus identities a good thing. We need to make them good. We need to start praising and uplifting LGBTQ plus expression, culture, identity, history. We need to be talking about these things and we need to be celebrating them. The second area is about belief systems. It's about what's normal. So when you see a boy and you say, oh, do you have a girlfriend? You're contributing, even if you don't mean any harm, you're contributing to heteronormativity. So how can we change those ways of thinking? Maybe instead you say, hey, do you have a partner? Or maybe we can go one step farther and not worry about other people's romantic relationships. It's not our business. Maybe they can share that with you if and when they feel comfortable. But thinking about what kinds of conversations and what kinds of belief systems do we just take for granted? A really common form of cisnormativity is of course, public toilets, where there's a boys' toilet and a girls' toilet, so where do trans people get to go? It's really important that in order to change our belief systems, we either have gender-neutral toilets or we allow trans people to use the toilet that they identify with. We need to break through these belief systems that gender is a binary of one or the other. And once we can recognize that gender is a spectrum and that people exist along that spectrum, we can start to create a world that works for trans people. And so we need to change those belief systems to accommodate LGBTQ plus identities. The third way is through institutions. Your school is an institution. Hospitals are an institution. The government is an institution. The police is an institution. Public transport. There's so many institutions in our society. And every single one of those institutions have policies and have hierarchies. These hierarchies work to make sure that policies are followed, like a uniform policy, like what language you're allowed to use on campus, like appropriate ways of expressing yourself. And some of these policies are really, really good and are really important. And the person at the top of that ladder has to make sure that the person underneath that ladder is making sure everyone follows the policies, and they make sure the person beneath them is making sure everyone follows those policies, and there's a hierarchy. Some policies are not so good, and some policies are not so good, especially for LGBTQ plus people. And while you don't get to necessarily write policy, and you don't necessarily get to change policy, you can pay attention to it. You can monitor it. You can ask to read the policies and get informed about it. And if you're denied that, you have the opportunity to point out that power hierarchy and how undemocratic and unfair it is. You have an opportunity to say, I want to know what my rights are as a student in this school. What are the rules? I want to hear them. I want to know what they are. And then say you see one that says, boys have to dress like this and girls have to dress like that. You have an opportunity to now say, well, how does this work for trans students? How does this work for non-binary students? What are the opportunities that this school is making for LGBTQ plus people? So that third area of resistance is about accountability to the institutions in your life and holding them accountable. And then the final area, the fourth area of resistance, is the big one. This is about big, large-scale social change. And to make this change, that's about protesting. That's about writing to your MP. That's about attending a pride parade. That's about having events like this event, right here, right now. This is large-scale change. It's a part of the process. And you should be very proud of yourself for being here today as part of that process. Let's do one more activity. I've just shared a bunch of ways that you can resist heteronormativity and cisnormativity. I want you to do some homework. I want you to think about how you occupy a space in this world and what ways you've seen heteronormativity and cisnormativity in action. What can you do to resist it? Maybe it's not very much. Maybe it's sharing a little bit of resources. Maybe it's just being a little bit more validating. Maybe it's about having difficult conversations with the adults in your life. Think about what you feel safe doing. Think about what you feel comfortable doing. And then maybe set yourself a little bit of a homework. Find a way that you feel you can contribute to making this world a safer and more affirming place for LGBTQ plus people. By telling LGBTQ plus people that you're fighting for them, by making change where the systems of heteronormativity and cisnormativity are no longer creating harm, we can get to the root of the problem, dig it right out, and stop poor emotional health and well-being before it happens. We can create a world where LGBTQ plus people are free to have a healthy sense of self, are free to see themselves represented in a variety of ways, and are free to feel validated automatically. So it is my hope for you that as you move forward in your lives, that you are paying attention to how the world isn't working for LGBTQ plus people, and then speaking up and trying to make that change. And in supporting each other in your emotional health and well-being, I hope you validate one another, I hope you affirm one another, and I hope that you uplift one another. And if that's not enough, then I hope you reach out to help and support. One of the ways that you can get support is through 42nd Street and through the work that I do with the Q42 project. Here's my email address. It's christopher.owen@42ndstreet.org.uk. And you can reach out to me if you need it, and we will find a way to get you the support that you need. Until then, take care of yourselves, and happy Pride.